The man you see smiling at his brother during his sentencing is Jason Vukovich. He earned himself the name the Alaskan Avenger when he began hunting down and attacking men convicted of abusing minors. And soon, you'll hear the story directly from him in an exclusive interview.
911. Police? Ambulance?
Yes, some guy just broke in with a hammer.
He broke into your house?
Yes, I've never seen him before.
When a string of break-ins and assaults began terrifying the residents of Anchorage, Alaska, the police were desperate to find out who was responsible. As the police investigated, they soon realized that the 3 break-in victims all shared a disturbing background that would bust the case wide open. As Alaska became the center of a media storm, the police were left trying to puzzle out the perpetrator's motive. Was he a vigilante who believed he could take justice into his own hands? Or were these violent crimes all part of a revenge spree? On June 24, 2016, Charles Albee was enjoying a peaceful morning in his home when he heard a knock at his door. Not suspecting anything dangerous could be on the other side, Charles opened it to find a tall man with dark shoulder-length hair and a black leather jacket staring down at him. The man forced his way into Charles' home and ordered him to sit on his bed. Charles followed the man's orders, but still, that didn't stop him from facing the man's wrath. The intruder slapped Charles around a few times and detailed how he was able to find Charles's address. He then stole a few items from Charles's home and fled. As soon as the intruder was gone, Charles called the police and told them everything he could remember about the man, including the fact that he appeared to be holding a notebook with a list of names in it. He also told them something about himself, which would soon be a key piece of evidence for the police. Charles Albee was convicted in 2003 of second-degree abuse of a minor, and the intruder had found his address through an offender registry. 3 days later, the police received a late-night call from a man named Andres Barbosa. According to Andres, he had been sleeping in his home when frantic knocking on his door woke him up at 4 a.m. When he opened the door, he was greeted by a tall man in a black leather jacket, as well as 2 women. The group pushed their way into Andres' home and ordered him to sit in a chair. Following their instructions, Andres sat and suddenly one of the women pulled out her phone and began recording. The intruder then punched Andres several times before threatening to, quote, bash in his dome with a hammer. The man then berated him and stated that he was here to collect what Andres owed. With the women's help, the man stole several things from Andres' home, including the man's truck, before the group fled the scene. While police were already pretty certain that this attack was related to Charles's break-in 2 days prior, there were enough differences that there was a possibility it could be someone else. For instance, the 2 women involved in Andres' assault had not been reported at the previous break-in. Additionally, the hammer used by the perpetrator in Andres' assault wasn't present in the assault against Charles. However, once officers learned that Andres Barbosa was a child abuser who was placed on the registry in 2014 after being caught with inappropriate photos of minors, they knew the 2 cases were connected. With this information, the police were beginning to see a pattern forming. Was this man going after child abusers? Was he just a man who had decided that the child abuser registry was an easy way to find potential break-ins? Or was there more to his motive? Detectives wouldn't have to wait long to find out, as 2 days later, another break-in was reported. However, this one had escalated much further than the others. On June 29th, police responded to a 911 call of another break-in, this time one that had ended in violent bloodshed. After arriving and rushing the man, Wesley Demarest, to the hospital, they were able to interview him and get an idea of what had taken place that night.
Start from the beginning and tell me what happened tonight.
Well, I was asleep. My roommate pounded on my door or something. I woke up and he said somebody's trying to break in. So I got out of bed, and by the time I got to my door, there was some guy standing there with a hammer. The guy told my roommate just to go sit down somewhere. Didn't do anything.
Okay.
Then he started yelling at me about sex offender. It was 2006. I had a conviction.
Okay.
I had attempted something or other with my step-granddaughter.
Okay.
And he said that he was avenging something. And he kept swinging the hammer back and forth. Told me to get down on my knees, which I didn't. And he told me to lay down on my bed, which I didn't. And then he slapped me a couple of times. Or I tried to hit him in the throat a couple of times. Tried to push him. Then he told me to get down on my knees. So I think then he hit me with the hammer on the side of my face.
Wesley Demarest is a registered child abuser who only served 9 months in jail for attempting to assault his kindergarten-aged granddaughter. It wouldn't take long for them to find the man responsible for the attack. The 911 call from Wesley's roommate had mentioned that the intruder left the house in a car shortly before the police arrived, so there was a good chance the man was still in the area.
This guy's leaving now. He's getting in his car now.
What kind of car?
It's a small car.
Do you feel safe going to check on your roommate to make sure he's okay?
Yeah, I'm going to go there now. Oh, man, he's really bleeding. We need an ambulance,
He's
too.
bleeding?
Yes.
Okay, where's he bleeding from?
He's bleeding from his head.
After searching through nearby roads, the police pulled over a suspicious Honda Civic not far from the victim's home. An officer approached the vehicle and introduced himself to the driver, a man by the name of Jason Vukovich. To the officer's surprise, Jason quickly and freely admitted to being the man who broke into Wesley's home. Realizing that they'd finally found their intruder, the officer began recording a preliminary interview with Jason. The officer's roadside interview with Jason started out fairly standard, with the officer reading Jason his Miranda rights and questioning him about what exactly went on at Wesley's house. When Jason is reluctant to talk about the actual attack with Wesley, despite admitting to being the perpetrator, the officer changes tactics and begins questioning Jason on how he discovered Wesley in the first place.
I believe it is the sex offender and kidnapping. So you just found the address, saw this guy, decided to go over to his house? Absolutely not. Okay, how did you decide to go over here? Well, I went to the bistro first. Right. That's where you work? And I talked to the executive chef, because I absolutely will not make any maneuver, period. Take any actions at all unless I go see her first. And what's her name? Her name is Cherie. And I've been working for this family for 40 years. Oh, 40 years. Yeah, okay. Correct. She has no relationship. Cherie doesn't know these people here, does she? I can't speak on anything that she does or doesn't know. I don't want to say something like that. What I do know is this. I will never take any action unless I go see my handler first. Okay.
This answer from Jason immediately gives the officer some crucial insight into his psyche. It appears Jason is displaying delusions of grandeur by seeing Cherie as his CIA handler, which is a common symptom of bipolar disorder. While it is fully possible that Jason is just saying these things to confuse or deceive the officer, it seems much more likely that Jason has convinced himself Cherie is a handler, sending him out on righteous missions. Those with bipolar disorders also suffer through phases of mania, where they may experience extreme happiness, anger, poor judgment, and paranoia. It's possible that Jason was in the throes of a manic phase when he decided to attack his 3 victims. After talking to the officer about Cherie, Jason was comfortable enough to tell them how he broke into Wesley's house with a hammer and got into an altercation with him.
How'd you get into the guy's house? What's the deal with the hammer? Well, that's how I got in his house. You broke your window, pried the door open? Yeah. Okay, and then you go talk to the gentleman? I attempted to, yeah. Okay. What happened? Did you assault him? He started freaking out, going wild. My intention tonight was to sit him down and remind him his family, nothing like this is what's going to happen. And I was giving him some open-hand slaps because that's typically an appropriate way. So open-hand slaps? To notify someone that what they're doing is extremely inappropriate. Okay, how many of those? 7. 7 of them? Okay. And then what happened? Did you assault him with a hammer at all? No, he started attacking. Started attacking you? Correct. Yeah. Was he attacking with his fists? Or? Yeah, he's kind of a big guy. He's pretty big guy. I didn't realize he was like 6'6" and kind of a monster. So let me tell you once again, courage is acting in spite of him. Sure, you got that. So he attacked me, and I'm really not much of a fighter, to be honest with you, seriously.
While Jason's account of events did slightly contradict that of both Wesley and his roommate, this interview made it clear to police that Jason was the intruder. Not only that, but his comments made them confident in the fact that he had also been responsible for the other 2 break-ins as well. Despite Jason being the only one involved with this break-in, he wasn't actually alone in the car. In the passenger seat was a woman named Elisa Geisler, whom police suspected was potentially one of the women involved in the break-in and assault of Andres Barbosa. Both Jason and Elisa were brought into custody for further questioning, as officers hoped that these 2 could shed more light on the many questions surrounding the case. First and foremost, why had Jason started hunting down offenders? Elisa was the first one to be interviewed at the police station. Detective Landis, the main investigator conducting the interrogation, walks into the interrogation room, only to find Elisa asleep in her chair. He tries to begin the interrogation after waking Elisa up. However, she's crashing from a high on methamphetamines and is struggling to stay awake. It's slightly questionable that officers would choose to interview Elisa in this state, as her inebriated state would affect both her judgment and her memory. Additionally, Elisa's mental state hinders her ability to make decisions, including consenting to the police interrogation. Despite this, officers are able to get a few key pieces of information out of her.
Is there a hammer in the car?
Oh, yeah, it is.
Lisa, if I want to get the hammer, where do I need to look in the car to find it?
I think it's just right there in the front seat.
Front seat? Okay.
Given the state Wesley was found in, it's likely that this hammer would be covered in blood. If the police were able to recover it from Jason's car, it could serve as damning DNA evidence against him. Alongside this information, Elisa is also able to nudge detectives closer towards Jason's motive.
Does Jason have a particular dislike for sex offenders? Has he ever talked to you about that?
Most of that I've been to jail. I have a special dislike for them, yes. I would say yes.
Unfortunately, before the detectives can get any more useful information out of Elisa, she passes out once more. After letting Elisa sleep for a few minutes, they try to interrogate her again. At first, it seems that she's just giving them more of the same information, until she mentions something interesting.
What was the conversation that Lucky had with you when he came out of the house? Did he say anything about hurting somebody or doing what was righteous?
Yeah,
or
something like that, probably.
Probably? Do you remember what it was?
Doing the work of the righteous.
It seems like here the detectives are attempting to use words that the other witnesses used in order to spark Elisa's memory and try to engage her. While this would normally be frowned upon in interviews, Elisa is extremely sedated and unlikely to provide any helpful information on her own. It might have been beneficial for the officers to let her sleep it off for longer and try to talk to her more openly when she was coherent, but they may have been worried that she wouldn't cooperate when she sobered up. The only person who could confirm or deny this for the police would be Jason himself, and it was finally time to interview him. In this interrogation, Detective Anderson takes over while Detective Landis sits in. Unlike most people brought in on assault and robbery charges, Jason is overwhelmingly friendly towards the detectives and is happy to chat their ears off. Despite his charming and polite demeanor, Jason avoids actually answering many of the detectives' questions, instead going into detail about his philosophies on life.
I mow the lawn with that and pull weeds and change light bulbs. And the reason why is because I'm attempting to demonstrate humility.
Detective Anderson stays calm and friendly towards Jason as he rants and slowly prods at him until Jason gives the detectives some useful information. By keeping his cool and acting like Jason's friend, the detective is able to build up a rapport with Jason and earn his trust. This tactic works, and Jason eventually gives the detective some information they can work with.
I'm just trying to get a sense of what's been going on.
I guess without getting into a whole bunch of unnecessary specifics, I can tell you that what's been going on is hard work. And hard work out of concern for kids.
Jason makes it clear to the detectives that everything he's done has been out of concern for children, and he even gives them extra insight on how he views his crimes against offenders.
People who have committed crimes against children have been convicted in a court of law, and you want to see that these people get what you believe they deserve. Is that not correct, or is that correct?
Let me think. Yeah. Be careful how I respond.
Okay.
This is what I would like to say. Do I think taking retributive action on people that have done something to kids, wanton or otherwise, is what I want. I have to say, not specifically, no. It's not my desire to go running willy-nilly through this life, doing something like that.
Maybe what you want isn't the right phrase. Maybe it's what you feel you are required to do, or that it's the right thing to do.
Those are both extremely accurate statements.
So even though you may not particularly want to do it, it's kind of a sense of duty.
Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt. It's kind of the way I say it is I wouldn't expect to have privilege or extra freedom in this life without also being willing to participate in the entire practice. Not just okay, cool, I can have all the good stuff, but none of the work.
Yeah. Well, I think when you use the term work, that's probably what I'm seeing is it's out of a sense of duty. It's actual work. It's not something you enjoy to do, but it's something you're required to do or you feel obligated to do.
That is without any exception the case. And I can tell you that internally I am in no way, shape, or form a violent or dangerous person. I certainly have no assaults on my record. I would not seek to I would say I would derive no joy from a person suffering anywhere.
Jason's urge to protect children is certainly admirable, but he could just be using that as a convenient excuse to enact violence on others. The police have to determine how much of this is true in order to fully understand Jason's motive. Unfortunately for the detectives, Jason's refusal to answer most questions in a straightforward manner makes it hard for them to get any concrete details out of him, forcing them to look elsewhere for information.
Hello?
Hey, this is Jim Anderson with APD. I got word from the DA's office that you had some info about Vukovich and what he was doing last time he was locked up.
He was talking to others about where they would go around and find guys that were convicted of child molestation or whatever, and he would tell them that they would provide them protection, but that they were keeping an eye on them, and that they knew who they were, and was trying to recruit other guys to join him in doing that.
It wasn't hard for Detective Anderson to acquire Jason's rather extensive rap sheet, and it became evident that Jason had a history of trying to deal with offenders. Now that there was more than enough evidence to prove Jason was responsible for the break-ins and assaults, it was just a matter of time until his trial and sentencing. While sitting in jail, Jason came up with a plea deal that would not only shock the press and the police, but would also reveal to the world the true reason he went after these offenders. On September 16, 2016, several months after his initial arrest, Jason sent a letter to the Anchorage Daily News claiming that he would be willing to serve the combined sentencing of not only his 3 victims, but also the sentence given to Jason's stepfather, the man who assaulted him as a child, but never served time for the crime. With the publishing of this letter, it became clear to the world that Jason wasn't just attacking offenders in an attempt to keep the local children safe. He was someone who had gone through the same pain and confusion that these offenders' victims had gone through. In his mind, he was going to do whatever he could to make sure that none of the men he could find would ever hurt a child like that again. The question was, is this vigilante justice or revenge? Well, we reached out to Jason, and he recounted that final incident that resulted in his arrest.
I started going places and knocking on doors. And, for the most part, delivering a pretty stern sermon and giving these guys a message of sitting them down in a chair, instilling through fear that, hey, there's people around here that care about these kids. Like, I never wore a mask. I never brought a gun. I never, this was not like some sort of murderous mission by any means. The last one I went to this guy's house, and I was knocking on all the windows and doors for probably 45 minutes. His lights were on, telling him to come outside. I needed to talk to him, and I knew he was awake. Obviously, he didn't want to come out and see me. So I grabbed a hammer out of a tool bag in the back of my car, and I used it to smash out the side light of his window and then climbed inside. He was a relatively wealthy person with his home had been converted, unbeknownst to me, to some sort of a bed and breakfast that was on a lake. And so a guy and a lady were coming out of one of the bedroom doors, and I knew they weren't him because I'd seen his picture. So I told him, "Get back in the bedroom. This doesn't have anything to do with you." And then I went into the master bedroom and get in there, and this guy is probably, I don't know, 6'4", 6'5", 300 pounds. This is a big guy. And I told him to sit down on the bed, and he didn't want to, and he started pushing on me a little bit, and then he started punching me in the face. Then I got angry, and I realized I had that hammer in the bag on the floor in between us, and so I just squatted down and picked it up, and I hit him one time, and then in the course of the struggle, I hit him 2 more times. I told him, "You know, you can consider me an avenging angel for the children you're molesting." And anyway, I'm assuming that the couple that I told to get back in the bedroom called the police, because by the time that whole physical altercation was over, I got back in the car and the police were already coming in, and they stopped the car. And police were patting me on the back, asking me, "Man, did you get that motherfucker? Did you get him good?" And were shaking my hand, all this sort of stuff. I was in shock. Ambulance is going by. I'm thinking to myself, you know, I've probably just killed this person and the rest of my life is gone. I am not a violent person, and I don't take joy in any sort of violent confrontations. I never have been, never will be. However, when you're regressed to the state of a child and you realize this time I'm going to win against this sort of person, there's some sort of a strange, you know, it's just sort of a strange feeling in that moment that it needs to happen, or it needed to happen. And that's the best way I can explain it.
In a recent interview conducted with the Unforbidden Truth podcast, Jason recounted his childhood and how it led him down this path of a violent crime spree.
You know, I have no memories whatsoever of about 12 years old on back. So I suppose, and I think that's a trauma-related response.
Jason's memories began with the abuse from his stepfather, Larry Lee Fulton. Jason and his brother Joel were both subject to abuse at Larry's hands, with the monster creating a custom 2x4 with a 2-handed grip to beat the backs of his stepson's legs. Not only did the 2 young boys have to grapple with beating so brutal they struggled to stand, but their stepfather soon began assaulting them during late-night prayer sessions.
My brother and I shared a room where he would come in and, you know, try to touch our genitals and all types of things like that. And again, as young kids, it's extremely difficult to make sense of what's happening to you.
While struggling to deal with the mental turmoil caused by his stepfather's actions, Jason turned to his mother for help.
Neither one of us had the courage to say anything, so I told Joel, that's my brother, I'm going to tell Mom what he's doing. So I told her, and she absolutely didn't believe a word we said and made me sit there on a kitchen stool until he came home from work, and had him march in the kitchen, and she did the standard, you know, tell him what you told me, made me recite the abuse to him, which he basically was very dismissive about, and mumbled something about being curious about whether we were maturing or, you know, something like that.
Jason and Joel were forced to endure the coming years with no hope of help from any adult in their lives. Eventually, it got to be too much for Joel, and he ran away from home, leaving Jason to face the full wrath of their stepfather. Joel was eventually found by the cops and was arrested for being a runaway. However, Joel made the brave decision to tell the cops why he ran away. An investigation into Larry Fulton was started, and he was eventually found guilty on charges of second-degree abuse of a minor. In the grand scheme of things, this charge was meaningless. Instead of sending Larry to prison or removing Joel and Jason from his abusive care, the state of Alaska suspended the 3 years of prison Larry was sentenced to as a part of his plea deal and sent him right back home to torment his children more. Not only did Joel face physical punishment from his stepfather for going to the police, but he claims he was also mocked and ridiculed by other members of his family for his confession. Joel and Jason were pulled from school immediately after Larry's trial, and the family moved to a town where Larry's abuse would be less known. Looking for any way to get out of the house, Jason began taking odd jobs fishing, hunting, or doing commercial work. Through these jobs, he was able to save up some money, and at the age of 16, Jason snuck out his bedroom window and ran away like his brother had done 3 years prior.
Part of the process of leaving home, my parents found out I had been sneaking out, so I came home from one of those nights, and my clothing was in trash bags on the front porch, and all of the windows and doors were locked, and they had kept my driver's license and my social security card, all my identifying papers.
Jason was able to afford a plane ride to Spokane, Washington with what money he had left, but with no ID, he was unable to get paid by any employers. Soon his money started to run out, and Jason was forced to turn to petty theft and forged checks to afford food. 5 months after starting his criminal career, the law finally caught up with Jason and he did time in juvenile hall. Shortly after his release, he would be arrested and brought back for similar crimes, a cycle that would continue for much of Jason's life. Jason commented on this part of his life in the letter saying, "Being a thief and a liar fit nicely with my lack of self-worth, my silent understanding that I was worthless, a throwaway. The foundations laid in my youth never went away. They simply remained hidden, and everything I chose to do was built on those thoughts and feelings from the past. I'd started down a long, winding path of deception and self-abuse." By the time he was 20 years old, Jason had spent over half of his adult life behind bars. The time not spent in prison was occupied by drugs and dead-end jobs. At 30 years old, Jason decided a change of scenery might be what he needed to bring his life in order, and he soon found himself back in his home state of Alaska. For a while, it seemed like life was improving, but that wouldn't last. Jason was finding joy in the little things again and was able to support himself through a legitimate job. Unfortunately, Jason lost the job a few months later and once again found himself resorting to crime. This would lead to a 6-year prison sentence, shortly followed by another 3-year stint in prison when Jason was caught violating his parole. After being released in the summer of 2016, Jason was once again aiming to live a humble and simple life. But those plans changed when he began to hear rumors of men in his community who were taking advantage of children. According to Jason, hearing these rumors made him think back to his own horrific childhood, and he felt the overwhelming urge to take matters into his own hands and hunt down the offenders in his area. These actions inevitably led to Jason being caught. He was eventually brought to the exact same courthouse his monstrous stepfather was tried. Despite many lauding Jason and calling his actions heroic, he ended his letter by discouraging copycat behavior, stating, "If you have already lost your youth like me due to a child abuser, please do not throw away your present and your future by committing acts of violence." While it can be tempting to explain away Jason's violent actions because he was abused, it's important to remember that many abuse victims don't go on to engage in criminal behavior. However, being abused or neglected as a child can increase the likelihood of arrest as a juvenile by 59%, as an adult by 28%, and for a violent crime by 30%. Many victims of abuse develop revenge fantasies where they imagine themselves standing up to their abuser and fighting back. In Jason's case, these fantasies may have made him feel all-powerful or divinely righteous to the point that he felt he was capable of making these revenge fantasies a reality by hunting down local offenders. Not only was Jason able to get symbolic revenge against the man who hurt him, but he was also able to help other children in the process by doing for them what he wished someone would have done for him. While Jason may have been able to gain some catharsis for his trauma through this revenge, he paid the ultimate price for it. In the days leading up to his official sentencing, Jason wrote another letter to the Anchorage Daily News, this time detailing his life story, explaining how he found himself in this situation, and discouraging other victims of abuse from following in his steps. He wrote, "To those who understand how it feels to live through abuse and carry it with you, let me share my story in an effort to prevent its repetition." Much of the public was on Jason's side, and they rallied for him to be given a light sentencing. In the end, Jason was given a plea deal that would reduce his charges. He recounted how officials reacted to his plea deal.
I wrote them an offer through the newspaper to the prosecutor's office, and I told them I will plead guilty to any combination of charges you wish, anything you want, with the following caveat. My sentence is to equal in length what each pedophile served in prison for harming a child. So the guy that raped his own daughter received 2 years and change. I'll serve his 2 years and change. The guy that was convicted of molesting his 10-month-old granddaughter got 3 years in prison. I'll serve his 3 years. So now we're at 5 years, 5.5 years. The child pornographer did 2 years or did a year and a program or something. So I'll do his, and I told them I'll even serve the 3 years in prison that you suspended for the monster that made me. So I'll do 9 years, 6 months, run that right now. I'll sign, I'll plead to whatever you want. And of course, they summarily laughed that offer out of the courtroom and said, this is not how we conduct business in the state of Alaska.
He was eventually sentenced to 25 years in prison. Not only was the public opinion of Jason incredibly high, but after being sent to prison, Jason discovered that many of the guards and fellow prisoners also considered Jason a hero, especially when his sentence was 3 times longer than the combined sentences of the men Jason assaulted. While being processed into prison, it was discovered that Jason was suffering from PTSD, which he believes was a factor in his crimes. Research shows an association between being the victim of trauma, especially chronic victimization, and the later perpetration of a crime. After serving the first 4 years of his sentence, he attempted to appeal, stating that his PTSD should have been taken into account during the sentencing process. However, this appeal was denied, and his sister Angelina has taken to social media to advocate for her brother's freedom. She's also managed to gather over 27,000 signatures on a Change.org petition, calling for Jason's release. Speaking to Jason from prison, he wanted to make one thing clear.
It's also important for people to know that never at any time was it me that went and sought out any sort of notoriety for this.
Since being in prison, he's reflected a lot not only on his own life, but that of some of the people he's met behind bars.
In retrospect, after being educated while being in here, you realize that childhood trauma is rocket fuel for everything destructive that a person has in their life. And no one tells you this, and no one comes along and gives you any pointers or indications or anything. You get jail sentences, and people tell you you're bad and horrible. And for me, I was a thief and a liar for many years of my life. You never stop to think why. I started getting letters from people all over the world, and contrary to what you might think, these weren't letters with high praise and accolades and pats on the back and things like that. Typically, these letters were 2 or 3 or 4 page descriptions of people's pain and the suffering and the things they went through when they were a kid. As I started realizing I wasn't alone. While I've been in prison, I have done informal surveys, and I'm telling you, the percentage is so high. Guys that end up leading a life of crime or drug addiction or demonstrate criminal behavior, it is so high, like probably 70 or 80% of these guys suffered childhood trauma or abuse. In my free time, I do a lot of writing. It was really cool. It's just actually finished a book with Professor Joshua Long at UMass in Boston. We co-wrote a book together called Legacy of Retribution. There's a guy named that runs a hardcore recovery coaching business, and he's offered me a job as a recovery coach, a trauma and addiction recovery coach, which is great. Probably devote the meaningful portion of the rest of my life to doing some sort of lasting legislative pursuit to change some of the laws pertaining to child abuse. Certainly in my state, maybe nationwide, would like to create an SOS app that allows kids to self-report abuse if they're suffering in the household. And that to me seems like a huge missing component in our society. And if that isn't a glaring, issue, I don't know what is, and people need to pay attention to that. The justice system needs to be realigned.
Jason was granted parole at his hearing on April 10, 2023. However, in a seemingly unprecedented move, his actual release date was set for April 11, 2028. Our most recent communication from Jason came in the form of a message on May 25, 2023. and reads as follows. Thanks for the kind message. I appreciate the support. Also, let everyone know that the book that I wrote with Professor Long is available for pre-order on June 30th, Barnes & Noble. It's called Avenging Child Abuse. Let me know if you want to do any follow-up conversations. I'm just trying to come to terms with the whole decision and do my time as quietly as possible. Needless to say, it was worth it to me then. It's worth it to me now. But you are correct, this was a very, very strange decision by the board. No classes to take, no further therapy available, just more time required. Odd. The circumstances of the 5-year delay of Jason's release are unclear and seem to be based on the inner workings of Alaska's parole system.
Threatening legal action. When first interviewed, Sean was defiant, openly expressing his dislike for Nancy. However, several days later, he voluntarily approached detectives and provided a DNA sample. Investigators also looked closely at Nancy's estranged son, Chad. Their relationship was highly strained. Chad had walked away from the family's faith and harbored deep anger, preventing Nancy from seeing his children. On the night Nancy disappeared, she had sent him a series of text messages attempting to find common ground. Chad was deeply distrustful of law enforcement, refusing to come to the station or provide a DNA sample. Detectives placed him under surveillance, observing him consume several beers before driving. He was stopped, arrested for driving with an open container and the empty beer bottles in his truck were collected for DNA testing. The results cleared both Chad and Sean Bloom, leaving investigators with a dwindling list of leads. In the case of Corey Richens, the contrast between her public persona and her private actions was exceptionally stark. Following Eric's death, Corey transformed herself into a public advocate for grieving children. She wrote and self-published a children's book titled Are You With Me? A tender story designed to help young children cope with the sudden loss of a parent. She hired a ghostwriter to polish the prose and dedicated the book to her amazing husband and wonderful father. She went on local television and radio programs, presenting herself as a vulnerable, courageous widow who was doing her best to navigate her own grief while raising her 3 young sons. Yet, behind this mask of maternal devotion lay a crushing financial reality. Investigators discovered that Corey was drowning in millions of dollars of debt. Her real estate business was built on a foundation of high-risk, short-term hard money loans. Her most ambitious project, the purchase of an unfinished $3 million mansion in Midway, Utah, was a financial disaster that she hoped to salvage using funds from Eric's estate. Her desperation had led her to commit staggering acts of fraud against those closest to her. Her best friend, Chelsea Barney, had given Corey $45,000 as a down payment on a home, only to discover that Corey had never properly filed the deed, resulting in the foreclosure of the home and the eviction of Chelsea's family. Other clients, Taryn and Alec Wright, had filed a lawsuit against Corey after purchasing a remodeled home that was filled with toxic mold and structural water damage, financially ruining the young family. Furthermore, investigators began to uncover a pattern of behavior that suggested Eric's death was not a sudden tragedy, but the culmination of a calculated campaign. In 2019, during a trip to Greece, Eric had become violently ill after drinking a beverage prepared by Corey, leading him to call his sister in fear that his wife was trying to poison him. On Valentine's Day, 2022, just weeks before his death, Corey purchased a breakfast sandwich for Eric. After taking a single bite, Eric suffered a severe reaction, requiring the use of his son's emergency epinephrine pen. He texted a friend, "I think she might have poisoned me." In Evansville, the investigation into Robbie Doerr's death began to focus on his wife, Becky, and her sister's fiancé, Larry Richmond Sr. Becky had projected the image of a devoted stay-at-home wife trying to build a picture-perfect life with her new husband, but the marriage was strained by the financial burden of her spending and Robbie's growing suspicion that she was being unfaithful. Larry Richmond Sr. was a man with a dark and violent history. When he was 17 years old, he had pleaded guilty to murder, serving 20 years in prison before his release. Mandy, Becky's sister, was deeply in love with Larry. Believing he was a reformed man, she brought him to family gatherings, introducing him to Robbie and Becky without revealing his criminal past. As detectives analyzed cell phone records, they discovered a hidden connection between Becky and Larry Sr. On the night of the murder, Becky had received a 4-minute phone call from Larry just minutes before Robbie pulled into the driveway. After the call ended, Larry's phone was powered down. Becky immediately deleted the record of this call from her phone. When questioned by detectives, she repeatedly denied speaking to anyone before the shooting, a lie that immediately shattered her mask of innocence. In Willard, Ohio, the mask worn by Paul Hicks was one of cold, arrogant control. Following Regina's murder, Paul continued to live his life without consequence, eventually securing custody of their son, Montana, though he left the boy to be raised by his mother. 14 years later, in 2015, Paul's deep-seated need to control and destroy those who crossed him emerged in a bizarre and elaborate scheme. He had entered into a volatile relationship with a woman named Kelly, which eventually ended in a bitter custody battle over their young son, Daniel. On June 18, 2015, a massive fire destroyed Paul's home. In Goshen, Ohio, Paul had a seemingly perfect alibi. He was staying in a hotel, hours away for his job on the railroad. He pointed investigators toward his surveillance system, which had survived the fire inside 2 gun safes. The video footage was remarkable. It showed a man and a woman in Tyvek suits entering the home and pouring gasoline. The woman had long, curly blonde hair that hung conspicuously over her shoulders. At one point, she stopped and looked directly into the camera. Paul immediately identified the woman as Kelly, claiming she was violent and had previously vandalized his hot tub. But the investigation, spearheaded by insurance attorney Zachary McCune, began. To reveal a dizzying level of deception, investigators discovered that the numerous harassing phone calls Paul claimed to have received from Kelly on the night of the fire were actually generated using a spoofing service, traced to an Internet protocol address associated with a phone Paul controlled. Even more shocking was the discovery of purchases made under the name of another woman Paul was dating. These included a high-quality blonde wig that matched the hair seen in the surveillance video and a custom-made latex mask purchased from a website called That's My Face. The mask had been created using photographs of Kelly's face that were found on Paul's phone. Paul Hicks had constructed an elaborate, real-life theatrical performance, utilizing a disguised accomplice to burn down his own home solely to frame his ex-girlfriend, destroy her credibility in their custody battle, and collect a $400,000 insurance payout. The mask of the victim had finally slipped, revealing the calculated manipulator beneath. Part 5. The tectonic shifts of science and memory. The turning point in any complex investigation often relies on a technological breakthrough or the sudden, long-delayed willingness of a human being to speak the truth. These shifts, whether scientific or psychological, have the power to dismantle the most carefully constructed lies. In the search for Nancy Woodrum, the investigation had reached a difficult impasse. Every immediate suspect had been cleared by DNA, and detectives were left with no active leads. It was at this critical moment that the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office decided to employ a pioneering forensic tool, Google geofencing. At the time, in late 2018, geofencing was a relatively new and untested technology in California. Investigators drafted a search warrant for Google, requesting location data for any cellular devices that had entered a specific virtual boundary around Nancy's cottage during a precise window of time on the night she disappeared. This window was established thanks to a crucial detail. Nancy's phone records showed an attempted 911 call at midnight 17 on the night of her disappearance, a call that was cut off after 0 seconds. When Google returned the data, the results were extraordinary. Amidst the rural isolation of El Faro Road, where very few cellular devices should have been active, the geofence captured a specific device pinging inside Nancy's studio cottage at 1:33 and 1:52 in the morning. Investigators secured a subsequent warrant for the subscriber information associated with that device. In November, the call came through. The phone belonged to Carlo Fuentes Flores, the polite, mild-mannered painter. With a name in hand, detectives began a covert surveillance operation. They followed Carlo to a local restaurant where he had lunch with his wife. After he departed, detectives collected a plastic Coca-Cola bottle he had used. The bottle was rushed to the forensic laboratory, where scientists extracted a DNA profile. It was an exact match to the DNA found in the bloody handprint on the pillow in Nancy's bedroom. The painter's mask of normalcy had been shattered by a silent trail of digital and genetic evidence. In Summit County, Utah, the evidence against Corey Richins was similarly compiled through a combination of digital forensics and financial analysis. Following her arrest, while she was being held in the Summit County Jail, corrections officers performed a routine search of her cell. Hidden among her belongings, they discovered a handwritten 4-page letter addressed to her mother. The letter, which became known as the Walk the Dog letter, contained explicit instructions for Corey's brother, Ronnie. Corey instructed her mother to tell Ronnie that he needed to testify that Eric had traveled to Mexico to obtain pain pills and fentanyl from ranch workers. She wrote, "Reward this, however, he needs to make the point to prosecutors this letter was an indisputable attempt at witness tampering, a desperate effort to construct a false narrative to explain the lethal concentration of fentanyl in Eric's system." Furthermore, investigators extracted deleted search queries from Corey's phone, conducted after a search warrant had been executed on her home. The searches were chillingly specific. Luxury prisons for the rich in America. Can cops uncover deleted messages iPhone? If someone is poisoned, what does it go down on the death certificate as? And what is a lethal dose of fentanyl? The final piece of the puzzle emerged when a handyman named Josh Grossman contacted Eric's family. Josh revealed that he had been engaged in a years-long secret affair with Corey. Their text messages, which were presented in court, revealed a relationship of intense passion and mutual dreams. Corey had texted Josh about her desire to divorce Eric and secure millions of dollars, suggesting they could live together in the guest house of the Midway Mansion. Less than 48 hours before Eric's death, she had sent a text to Josh. "Hang in until Friday. Life is going to be different. I promise." In Evansville, the digital evidence recovered from Larry Richmond Sr.'s iPhone provided the definitive timeline of Robbie Doerr's murder. After months of painstaking effort, investigators with a high-tech crime unit successfully bypassed the phone's security passcode. The location data revealed that in the hour leading up to the shooting, Larry's phone was active in the immediate vicinity of Robbie's Oakley Street home, moving through the dark alleys behind the property. At 6:46, he spoke with Becky on the phone for several minutes, confirming that Robbie was on his way home. Following that call, Larry powered down his phone. At approximately 7:05, Robbie pulled into his driveway and was executed. At 7:11, surveillance footage from a nearby Circle K gas station showed Larry arriving in a Ford Taurus, wearing only a sleeveless t-shirt in the freezing February cold, where he powered his phone back on. Additionally, a jailhouse informant named Muhammad, who had shared a cell with Larry, approached detectives. He testified that Larry had confessed to the shooting, explaining that he and Becky had planned the murder so they could be together and secure Robbie's firefighter pension. In Willard, Ohio, the breakthrough in Regina Hicks' 23-year-old cold case came through the power of voice and memory. Ashley Ford, a local podcaster, began a series of episodes focusing on the unsolved murder, shining a public light on the roles of Paul Hicks and his best friend, Steve Gates. The public attention and the persistent work of the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation created an inescapable pressure. Steve Gates, who had carried the secret of Regina's death for over 2 decades, finally realized his silence was no longer tenable. Through his attorney, Gates approached prosecutors, offering to reveal the truth in exchange for immunity from prosecution for his decades of lies. In a highly emotional interview, Gates described the events of October 18, 2001. He recalled hearing Regina and Paul arguing in his driveway. When he emerged from his barn, he looked into the passenger side of Regina's white Camaro and saw her unconscious body crumpled on the floorboard. Paul Hicks stood beside the car, stating coldly, "She is dead." Gates admitted that out of fear and a misplaced sense of loyalty, he had followed Paul's instructions. He watched as Paul drove the Camaro into the deep farm pond and then drove Paul and Montana away from the scene. On the drive back, Paul used his cell phone to call Regina's phone, a calculated move to create a false record of him trying to reach her after she had supposedly failed to arrive. The heavy burden of memory, carried in silence for 24 years, had finally collapsed, bringing the truth into the light. Part 6. The Halls of Justice. The ultimate resolution of these tragedies took place within the quiet, structured confines of the courtroom. Here, where emotion is tempered by the rules of evidence, the perpetrators were forced to face the consequences of their actions, and the families of the victims were finally allowed to speak. In San Luis Obispo County, Carlo Fuentes Flores was brought into the interrogation room by Detective Cole and his partner, Dave. Confronted with the genetic evidence matching his DNA to the bloody handprint on the pillow, Carlo's defenses crumbled. At first, he attempted to claim that Nancy's death was an accident, stating that he had returned to the ranch to retrieve a ladder and had accidentally run her over with his truck. He claimed he had carried her inside to help her, where she collapsed. But detectives pressed him on the inconsistencies of his story. Carlo eventually admitted to a far more sinister reality. He had entered Nancy's cottage at midnight with the intention of sexually assaulting her. When she fought back, he struck her repeatedly, raped her, and then suffocated her with a pillow. He then wrapped her body in her bedding, loaded her into his truck, and drove an hour east into the desolate, desert topography of the Carrizo Plain, where he left her remains exposed to the elements. Carlo offered to lead detectives to her body. After stopping at several remote locations in the grass, he finally pointed to a small stack of rocks. There, investigators recovered Nancy's skeletal remains. Rather than face a public trial, Carlo Fuentes Flores entered a slow plea. The prosecutor presented the staggering volume of evidence to the judge, who found him guilty of first-degree murder with a special circumstance of rape. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At Nancy's memorial, held at a beautiful vineyard, hundreds of community members gathered To remember a woman of extraordinary faith and kindness, whose daughter, Amanda, now rides Montana through the same quiet hills, carrying her mother's memory. Forward. In Summit County, Utah, the trial of Corey Richens was a highly anticipated event. The prosecution, led by Brad Bloodworth, presented a powerful case, detailing her millions of dollars of debt, her drug purchases through Carmen Lauber, her secret affairs, and the chilling internet searches on her phone. During the trial, Corey's defense team, led by public defenders Kathy Nestor and Wendy Lewis, made a stunning tactical decision. After the prosecution rested its 13-day case, the defense immediately rested their case without calling a single witness or presenting any evidence. They argued that the state had failed to meet its burden of proof, pointing out that there was no direct forensic evidence showing how the fentanyl had entered Eric's system. But the jury was unpersuaded. After deliberating for just under 3 hours, they returned with a unanimous verdict, guilty on all counts, including aggravated murder. Corey Richens, the woman who had portrayed herself as a grieving mother and author, was found guilty of the calculated murder of her husband. She faces a sentence of life in prison without parole. Her parental rights have been terminated, and her 3 sons are now being raised by Eric's sister, Katie, surrounded by the love and memory of their father. In Evansville, Indiana, Elizabeth Becky Fox Dorr was tried first for her role in Robbie's murder. The prosecution demonstrated that she had conspired with Larry Richmond Sr., acting as the inside informant who provided the timeline for the ambush. Her own son, Nathan, took the stand, testifying that his mother had repeatedly asked about Robbie's pension on the very night of his murder. The jury found Becky guilty of murder and conspiracy to commit murder. She was sentenced to 90 years in prison, ensuring she will spend the remainder of her life behind bars. Her son, Nathan, has stated he will never visit her. Larry Richmond Sr. was tried subsequently, despite his defense's arguments that the case was entirely circumstantial. The mountain of digital evidence, the testimony of his son, and the confession to his cellmate proved insurmountable. The jury found him guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the Evansville Fire Department, a new fire engine was dedicated in honor of Robbie Dorr, a permanent tribute to a hero who spent his life protecting others. In Huron County, Ohio, Paul Hicks stood trial 24 years after the murder of Regina. The prosecution's case relied heavily on the dramatic testimony of Steve Gates, who recounted the details of that dark October night. Paul's sister, Crystal, also testified, recalling that she had returned home on the night of the murder to find Paul's muddy clothes floating in the bathtub and fresh scratches on his face. The defense argued that the state's case was built on the testimony of a confessed liar who had been granted immunity, but the jury, recognizing the consistent pattern of control and violence that defined Paul's relationships, returned a verdict of guilty on all counts of murder and kidnapping after only 3 hours of deliberation. Paul Hicks was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. While the conviction brought a sense of justice, the pain remained for Regina's family, particularly her son, Montana, who had grown up in the shadow of his mother's absence and his father's lies. These 4 cases, resolved across decades and miles, stand as a testament to the quiet, relentless pursuit of justice. They remind us that the truth, though it may be buried in the desert plains, hidden behind mountain vistas, deleted from digital devices, or submerged in the depths of a quiet pond, has a voice of its own. It is a voice that cannot be permanently silenced, carried forward by the dedication of those who honor the memory of the lost and refuse to let the darkness win. No matter if it is a parent, a sibling, or a friend talking about loss with kids can be a tricky subject. Joining us now is author of Are You With Me? Corey Richens. And Corey, I want to start with your story. What happened in your personal life? So, my husband passed away unexpectedly last year. He was 39. It completely took us all by shock. We have 3 little boys, 10, 9, and 6. And it has only been a year. How did you go from processing death to I need to write a book and help others? You know, I just watched the struggle that my kids were going through and trying to find something that we could use to cope at night. Nights are the hardest, it seems like, for everybody when dealing with anything. But I just wanted some story to read to my kids at night. I was reading it, and I remember I just was in tears. And I thought, like, this is perfect for your family. It just seemed perfect. And so I was just baffled at how she even had the time to do that. And it is explaining to my kid, just because he is not present here with us, that does not mean his presence is not here with us. And he is doing these things with us. Viewers at home, what they saw in that interview was this bereaved young woman who tragically lost her husband. Like, Dad is still here. It is just in a different way. But this would be just the beginning of the story. And boy, was there a lot more coming there. It is a little after 3 in the morning and Corey Richens calls 911, saying her husband, Eric, is not breathing and is cold to the touch. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Count out loud so I can hear you. I am counting with you. 1, 2, 3, 4. Officers are dispatched to the scene. Paramedics and firefighters are already there when they arrive. In those first few moments of the police body-worn camera, you're watching this life or death moment unfold. Law enforcement is trying to make sense of it all. Inside the bedroom, you can see law enforcement trying to help Eric Richens. He is on his back on the ground. He has no pulse. He is not breathing. And they're using a cardiopulmonary resuscitation machine, so you can hear this sort of rhythmic sound. What is your first name? Let them do their work in there. That is what happened today. Oh, no. He was just fine. He was fine. When you say we were fine, what time did you see him when he was alert? We had a drink together at 9 to celebrate something at work. Hours earlier, they were celebrating a big financial win for her real estate business. She mentions that had a cocktail before bed. She mentions that her son has night terrors and that she had been asleep with him.
When I sleep with my
kids, I will just wake up and I go back to my own bed. Where are your children? Now, they're asleep in that room. 2 are awake with their ears in the door.
I
do not want to wake them up. Please do not make me come out. At one point, the officer asked if she would like to call anybody, and she mentioned she wants to call her mom. Care you to use my phone? I got a call. It was Corey. Said, Mom, you need to come up here. I said, something has happened. She said,
Eric.
Does he have any medical conditions or anything like that? Lyme disease? So they're asking questions like, does he have any health ailments? No heart problems or anything like that. So while she is talking to the officer, she says that sometimes he takes a gummy to sleep, but she also tells him she is not sure whether he took one that night. It is like a gummy, is not it?
Like a
tetrahydrocannabinol gummy? Okay. Does he have any history of illicit drug use? Or anything in the past year?
No.
As I pull in the driveway, 3 cops come, running at me, asking who I am. I went running through the house to get to
Corey.
And it was just devastating. She was in total shock. I had no idea, not only as a mother, what to do for her, but as a person, how to help a person in
shock.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. I went and talked to the boys, and they're just
confused.
They are not crying because they do not know what is going on.
They
just know a lot of cops are there. Corey Richan's mother, Lisa Darden, says that he got weekly allergy shots.
And
maybe that has something to do with his medical condition. He did not look good last night. He looked pale last night. And I asked if he were okay. Yeah, but he was saying his chest was hurting. I had seen him that day.
And I
said, oh, my God, what is wrong with you? You look horrible.
For a moment, the
deputy walks away from Corey Richans, and you can see a conversation between him, another officer, and an emergency medical technician. I do not know if he had a hemorrhage or something with all the blood. That is, there is a lot of blood for no reason. A little bit coming out as soon as we start doing compressions.
Okay.
All right.
I do not know.
The amount of blood was sort of surprising to the paramedic. And this leads to the initial hypothesis of an aneurysm. My husband is active. He did not just die in his sleep. This is insane. Eric was very athletic. You would never expect an aneurysm. But that is what they're telling us. They do not know. They are saying an aneurysm. And you just cannot believe he is gone. In the body camera footage, you actually hear Eric's sister, Katie, before you see her.
No.
No, what happened? What happened? She is moaning and she is screaming out.
And
it is the raw, guttural pain that you hear when you have just learned that someone you love has died. In the video, you see Katie take Corey and Eric Young boys upstairs and away from the turmoil. But at one point, Katie even can hardly
breathe.
Natural, okay? Take a deep breath.
Take a deep breath.
Okay.
I
Cannot breathe. I cannot breathe. Oh my God. I cannot breathe. I just talked to him like a couple hours ago. At 3:58 in the morning, Eric Richens is officially declared dead, but it is also noted that he appears to have been dead for quite some time before they arrived at the residence.
The
next thing is our detective and our medical examiner is going to respond to the location. They're going to do their investigation and document everything.
And
then most likely, because of his age and his health and everything else, most likely, the county coroner office has an obligation, a legal requirement really, to investigate forensically any unexpected death. Whenever you have a young man like this who dies mysteriously, you can bet they're going to do an autopsy. This is the night of a tragic end, but the beginning of a mystery that will take years to unravel. The night that Eric died, Corey says that they were celebrating. They were celebrating what was going to be her most ambitious purchase yet for her real estate business. A distressed mansion in Midway, Utah that she hoped to buy for millions, flip it, and sell it for millions more. She was so excited about it and the possibilities for it. This was a very big moment for Corey Richens. Corey grew up working for her aunt cleaning company, cleaning the toilets of the rich people who lived in mansions in Park City. Corey would dream that one day she would be the one that owned the mansions and not the one cleaning the
toilets.
This was Corey's moment to say, look, I did it. I made something of myself, and now I am on the other side. Corey grew up in a family that moved a
lot.
My parents worked construction, so we would move every 2-3 months. Growing up, we were not poor by any stretch, but we were not wealthy by any stretch either. My parents did what they had to do to get by. When she got to junior high, her family really made a home in Heber City, Utah.
It is also part
of Summit County. It is a beautiful mountain town, and there she finds a really close group of girlfriends. We just had a really good core group of friends.
And
the text we would get every weekend was, hey, where's the party at?
And
then we also played sports, and then we were in the same classes together, and we just kind of evolved from there. She is on the cheer team. In high school, she is playing tennis, and she seems to have really found a home and belonging. She was a tough cookie. Anybody said anything wrong about us, you could kind of always count on Corey to handle it. Corey and Eric met when Corey was working at a Home Depot. Home Depot paid the best. It was brand new. It was in Park City, and it paid really well for cashiers. He was coming into the Home Depot a lot because of his stonemasonry business, and they headed off and started talking. And people remember sparks flying and instant chemistry. He was significantly older than her. She just thought the world of Eric. Eric was it. Eric grew up in Bountiful, Utah. Went to high school at Woods Cross. The Richens owned a cattle ranch in Summit County, and he grew up working on this ranch. His sisters rode horses. They had animals. They were outdoorsmen. Eric was one of 3 children with 2 sisters, Amy and Katie. and he was very close to his mother, who had died in 2018. Eric grew up a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormon Church. His dad shares that it was one of the most important things that they wanted to instill in their children was faith and religion. So much so that Eric went on a 2-year mission for the church to Mexico City, and then came back and started his stone masonry business. Eric was a very dynamic individual. He worked hard, but he also played hard. He had all-terrain vehicles. He camped. He explored. Eric was a big-time hunter. Go to Africa. Big trophy hunting stuff. They began dating. Corey became pregnant with their first child, and they married soon after. The marriage is a backyard ceremony. Family and friends gather.
Corey is
about to walk down the aisle, and Eric's mother presents her with a prenuptial agreement. And the agreement says that his stonemasonry business belongs to him, and that the only way that she would benefit from that business would be if he were to die while they were married. Corey was pretty distraught over it,
but
ultimately she signed it. She loved Eric. She wanted to marry Eric, so she went along to get along, I guess. I do not think it is a secret that Eric's family, or at least parts of Eric's family, did not approve of Corey. It was a rough start at the beginning, and once that got past, they had a good wedding.
Corey
and Eric ended up having 3 boys in 4 years.
She planned that. She was a
planner, and that was her plan. Corey was everything he would probably want as a
mom.
She loved her boys. Her boys are her world. And when she was not working, she was with her kids. From Boy Scout leader to soccer to you name it, she is involved in everything. Eric he was a dedicated dad. He was a soccer coach for the boys. My last memory of Eric was me in their living room playing soccer with his son, and Eric was sitting in his chair, sitting back like this, giggling, while his son kicked my ass in soccer, and he was really proud of it. Eric's business has become incredibly successful. It is a $1 million business, C&E Masonry. And they have a very affluent life. They are taking trips together. My first cruise was with them. They would go out to fancy restaurants. Yeah, they had money to spend. At the beginning of all, Corey stayed home with the children. But at some point, Corey wanted more.
And
she started a real estate business. In 2019, Corey starts K. Richens Realty, which is her home flipping business. That first year, Corey buys and resells a property to a family that says they found their dream home. Guess who his homeowner is? Me. And him.
And me.
And him.
And me. We just bought a house.
Just 2 years later, Corey is managing 15 renovation projects. Corey is making very good living. It is expanding quickly. She is buying a lot of properties, and by all accounts, it is very successful. This looks like the all-American perfect family. A beautiful home, a beautiful family, beautiful children, and 2 thriving businesses. What is your first name? Yeah, let me
tell you.
Nobody ever thought Eric was going to die. Of course, Eric Richens, dedicated father, has provided for his children. But this grieving widow is about to discover her future will not be quite what she thought. Eric's sister, Amy, says this home is not yours. They are screaming back and forth. I stepped in between the two of them. I learned the news about Eric passing on March 4th through a phone call.
Why?
What happened? What could have caused it? It was just surreal. And just the day before, Corey says that she and Eric were toasting the purchase of her dream property, a $2.9 million mansion. And just hours later, Eric would be dead. Eric is beloved in the community, and many people come and gather at the family home to sort of celebrate his life. There were just constant people coming in and out of the house, paying their condolences. We were just, reminiscing about Eric. We were all just there to support Corey, keep the boys occupied, keep their minds sort of off of, what happened. We were literally talking about Eric the entire night, and we were just dancing and listening to his favorite songs. Cheers, boys. One of our friends is shotgunning a beer. Richens, yep. And it is not the way everybody else may celebrate, but that is how we did it because that is what Eric would have done with us. At one point, they are playing music and Cody Johnson's song, Till You Cannot comes on, and this is Eric's favorite song. I mean, it is an incredible song with a very obvious meaning. Live until you cannot, And to know that we just lost somebody so suddenly, it put things in perspective. Corey is dancing with her 3 sons, and Eric's sister Amy films the dance. And there was this light that kind of projected around them, and she is like, I swear Eric is dancing with them right now. Like, it was special. And it is this real moment of sort of solidarity between the two families. But that solidarity appears to be short-lived. The morning after that gathering, there is a dispute, an argument between Corey and Eric's sister Amy. Corey realizes that Eric's will is in a safe. She seemed a little adamant about getting that will, and she was pretty positive that it was in the safe, but she did not know what the combination was. Eric Richens' sister Amy is at the house, and a locksmith shows up to access the safe. You just hear, this blood-curdling scream as I ran out into the garage. And Amy had seen a sign on a truck that said locksmith or something. She flipped out and told Corey, you are not supposed to be getting into the safe. And then Amy drops a bomb. She tells Corey that Eric had secretly set up his trust and will, and Corey was largely cut out. They are screaming back and forth. I stepped in between the two of them. Eventually, the police showed up. In the midst of all of this, Corey wants to fact-check what is going on, and they call the estate planner. So the estate planner ends up confirming to Corey that right around 2020, Eric had created an estate, and that his sister Katie was in charge of that and the executor. He makes his sons the beneficiary of the trust. He puts the house in the trust. And that is when those words of, "It is not your home," came out. And Corey is like, "It is my house." I have lived here for 10 years. What are you talking about? Amy told authorities that Corey punched her in the face and the neck.
Corey is
then arrested and charged with assault. She ends up pleading no contest, but she is found guilty of assault. To think this is happening 2 days after Eric's death, and then these two families have to see each other again at Eric's funeral. The funeral itself, I think, went off very well, but you could already see the animosity between the two families. It is contentious. Oh, the funeral was incredibly uncomfortable. Corey stood in one, and then his family stood in another area. Yeah, it was a very obvious divide immediately, and they would not talk to each other. There really was not much reference to Corey. There was not a lot of love going on. Over the top, lavish casket. It was like a horse and
buggy.
It was grand. It was very country. It was just the most uncomfortable funeral I have ever been at. His 40th birthday was just a couple weeks after the funeral. Like his clothes had already been taken down, and she was not wearing a wedding ring, and I thought that was a little odd. I mean, it was not even a month. As the months passed, Corey filed a civil lawsuit against Eric's sister, Katie, disputing the trust, and Corey seems to continue to adjust to life as a single mother and a businesswoman. Corey talks a lot about how important routine is to getting through the process of grief. And so, usually at nighttime, this is when you read to your children. And she was saying that they looked for something to read. They would answer some of these questions, and she found nothing. She said, I have looked everywhere, and I can not find a book on grieving for children. She said, I wonder if I could write
one.
Corey Richins self-published a book called Are You With Me? The first part of the book is actually written from the child perspective. The little boy who is wondering if his dad is with him. Corey actually used a ghostwriter in order to create this book. Are you at my soccer game when I scored that goal for you? I looked for you in the crowd, but you were not there. Did you see it? And then, later on in the book, it switches to the deceased father perspective.
And he
sort of starts saying, yes, I am with you. I am with you when you scored that goal for me. You could not hear me cheer for you, but I yelled and clapped as loud as I could, just like always. Corey dedicates the book to my amazing husband and a wonderful father. And then there is a drawing of the family of
5.
You see Corey and Eric together with their 3 children and the dog.
I
will forever love you, my sweet baby, until we see each other again. Yes, I am with you. In March 2023, Corey Richins goes on these local radio and television stations talking about the book. We got an email wrote into the station. It was Corey saying that she had just written what she believed to be was the first book for kids about coping with grief, and that she would love the chance to share that on Good Things Utah. My kids and I kind of wrote this book on the different emotions and grieving processes that we have experienced last
year.
And to make sense and process, I am sure. Yes, exactly. What a shock this must be for this poor woman. My heart went out to her. I am new to all of this. So kind of doing, research and reading books and things to try and understand, not only how to grieve as a widow, as a wife, but also, with my kids, how to help them understand what just happened. But the big shock happened a couple of days later when we get an anonymous email, and there is just one line, and it is in all capital letters with many exclamation marks at the end. And it says, she killed her husband. Corey, thank you. While Corey has moved on with her life and is promoting her children's book about coping with grief, authorities have been digging into the circumstances surrounding Eric's death. Were you first on today? We were second. And there was blood before you leave? A little bit coming out as soon as we start doing compressions. Originally, it was one of the emergency medical technicians on scene who suggests that maybe Eric had an aneurysm. I wonder if he had an aneurysm or something with all the blood. And I think that made a lot of sense to the family on scene right then, because what else would it be that would make a healthy 39-year-old man all of a sudden stop breathing in the middle of the night? So law enforcement says that there will be an autopsy. They think it might have been an aneurysm, but they do not know. For the people that knew Eric, the autopsy was absolutely shocking. The initial autopsy report comes back, and it is drug intoxication fentanyl as the cause of death. 5 times he announced a fentanyl that could kill anyone. Eric did not do drugs, not to my understanding, and Corey was saying the same thing. So it was just baffling. They also found that it was not medical-grade fentanyl. So this is nothing that was prescribed by a doctor. This would have been, drugs off the street, the type of drugs that you would procure on a corner and do not necessarily know the origins of. The autopsy report jumpstarts a criminal investigation because this is not a natural death. This is either an accident of the overdose or someone killed Eric. Now police officers realize they have to find the origin of the drug. Police get a search warrant to search the Richens' home for illegal drugs. Investigators go in. They seize Corey electronics, Eric electronics, and they search the house for anything that could possibly have traces of fentanyl, but they do not find any fentanyl. During this search, Corey is stopped by then lead detective Jamie Woody, and at that moment Corey says what everybody else is saying, that Eric does not do drugs, that she is shocked by the cause of death. Corey Richens talks to the chief medical examiner and essentially has a bunch of questions, and she goes down a list of the various items that were found in the stomach contents. The third one, the acetyl, I do not know how you say that. Acetyl fentanyl. That is just a variant of fentanyl that is usually only present in the setting of illicitly manufactured fentanyl. Illicitly manufactured, like a pharmacy? No, like fentanyl that is manufactured by drug cartels as opposed to by pharmaceutical companies. Oh, good Lord. It is pretty clear she is kind of reading from the report and asking individual questions about each part. I was just trying to figure out, if we found out anything new. Definitely death from fentanyl intoxication. And we still do not know how he got it into him.
Yeah,
I mean, is that anything you could ever find out? When the toxicology report comes back, Eric family comes forward to law enforcement and says, well, we have some concerns about the toxicology report. Eric did not do drugs. The Richens family was immediately suspicious that Corey had a role in Eric's death. According to Eric family, while it seemed like Corey and Eric were flying high when he died, it was a very
different reality.
Eric discovered, actually in 2020, that Corey had taken out a loan to help her business and did so without telling him. Corey had taken out a $250,000 line of credit against the home, which Eric solely owned and had no idea about. That made them all start to be very concerned with Corey's financial situation, and that is actually what caused him to change the trust, because he wanted to make sure his children were taken care of. The family says that when Eric finds out, he visits a divorce attorney. I think it is like, how can you deceive your spouse like that? When you own a home, the idea that you're going to take out a line of credit that they are never going to realize this, and you are somehow going to go out and spend $250,000, and they're just never going to get that that is what was going on behind the scenes. It is pretty shocking. They end up going to counseling, and they do not separate. But there is this idea, she has lied about their finances. Even if there is a facade of things being good within the marriage, there is still a real permanent rift between the couple and the trust that has been broken there. But as it turns out, allegations of financial crimes are not the only evidence investigators are uncovering. A year after Eric's death, Corey's finances are not looking good at all. She thought she was going to be getting an inheritance, and now the weight of her debt is bearing down on her. She is in a lot of trouble here. She owes a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars. It was hard for her that year, financially and emotionally. Her kids, were crying at night because their dad is gone. And she has Eric's family who are blaming her for his death. Emotionally, she kind of seemed like she is hanging on by a thread. Corey was also trying to run this business that she was doing, and she just seemed really stressed out. One of Corey's biggest financial burdens was this mansion she had purchased, a luxurious piece of property on the most beautiful land. She buys it for close to $3 million. But at this point, the mansion is far from finished. Corey Richens commissioned this YouTube video of the house construction. It even included a virtual view of the planned luxe amenities. Corey had talked about turning the Midway Mansion into an event space where people could have weddings. It needed a lot of work, estimated to be a couple million. Corey is allegedly making all of this work through hard money loans. And these are loans that are short-term. They cost more. They tend to be riskier. But Corey did not have money from Eric's estate to help, and eventually lost the mansion to foreclosure. The fallout from Corey's financial strain allegedly ends up harming one of her best friends, a woman named Chelsea Barney. Corey has been helping her best friend buy a home, her first home. So she says, look, I will get the loan. You will sign the deed. The home will be yours, and you can pay the mortgage each month. She was a waitress and a manager at a restaurant, and she had saved all of her tip money. For years, she gave Corey $45,000 as a down payment.
She was
always on time with her payment, and so when all of a sudden she was getting notices that her home might be in trouble, she called and asked for a copy of
the deed.
Essentially, Chelsea had found out that the deed was never properly filed with the county. She never was the owner of the home. The house is
foreclosed on.
Chelsea and her family are evicted. And to add insult to injury, all this money she saved up to buy this home, it is gone. And there is another family who also say their dealings with Corey did not end well.
We just bought a house.
Taryn and Alec Wright buy this home for their family.
It has been
remodeled. There is a view of the mountains. It has a great yard. But once they were in that home, they discovered a major problem. They claim they find mold in the walls, and they say there was water coming in, and that everyone in the family got sick. Nosebleeds, asthma, really unpleasant stuff. Corey denied that she had any knowledge of any problems with the home and that the home had been inspected prior to their closing on it. The Wrights filed a lawsuit and told 2020 they lost their house to foreclosure, saying they have been financially ruined by the cost of a long-term temporary rental while still paying for that home. Meanwhile, there are people who are starting to say out loud what only a few knew, that Eric had gotten ill in the past, and he suspected Corey was behind it. Eric and Corey were on a trip to Greece in 2019. They are out having dinner one night, and everyone is ordering drinks. Eric had just recently got Lyme disease from a hunting trip. He is taking medication for it. On that medication, you are not allowed to have alcohol. It will make you very, very sick. Eric ordered a virgin drink. When they brought it over, he tasted it and said that he thought that there was alcohol in it. He started not feeling well, and they ran up to the hotel room. He called his sister Katie and told her that he thought that Corey had tried to poison him. I do not believe Eric said that. I do not believe he ever said that. They were in a restaurant when he got sick, so the only one serving him was a waitress. Then, actually on Valentine's Day of 2022, so only weeks before his death, Corey had ordered a sandwich from a local diner. The server entered the phone and then took out order was placed a Bald Mountain bagel sandwich, which is just a toasted bagel with bacon, egg and cheese, avocado, and sliced tomato. And 12 minutes later, Corey came in and picked it up and paid for it. When she left the sandwich for him, she left a note basically just saying, "Happy Valentine's Day. I love you." After just a single bite, Eric seemed to believe he was having an allergic reaction. He used his son EpiPen, took some Benadryl, and went to sleep. And when he woke up, he texted friends, "You almost lost me this time. I think she might
have poisoned me."
And police are about to learn just where that poison could be coming from. Corey came to me about a year after she said her husband had died. All she had said was that he passed away and she was ready for some new family photos. So she wanted to get her hair done to look cute in the pictures with her
sons.
I was really impressed with how she was handling that situation with her little boys and how much she was doing with her life. Corey spent 5 or 6 hours in my chair. We did a full color on her, and then we did her extension install after that. I think she ended up spending around $2,900. It has been a year since Eric Richen's death, and Corey is moving on with life. But Eric family, however, is frustrated. They say they are not seeing progress in the investigation, and they're dealing with the back and forth lawsuits over the estate. So they decide to hire a private investigator. This private investigator pulls phone records, looks at thousands of text messages, pulls electronics, gets cell phone data. So when the private investigator gets into these phone records, he discovers that there are essentially 3 people that Corey is communicating with all the time. One is Eric, the other is her mother, and the third person is a woman named Carmen Lauber. This is between the months right before and right after Eric Richens dies. So why is Corey talking to Carmen Lauber so much? Carmen worked for my sister cleaning houses and cleaning the fix and flips. Corey would call her and say, "Hey, I need you to go to this address, clean this house." This woman has a checkered past, including a whole bunch of drug stuff. With the information that the private investigators gathered, he is forwarding all of that to the Summit County Sheriff Office. A new lead detective is put on the case, Detective Jeff O'Driscoll, and his theory is to start over, start fresh. Carmen is in a court-ordered drug program, and Detective O'Driscoll takes the opportunity to search her trash. He finds drug paraphernalia, and that is a violation. Now he has got probable cause to search her home. Not only do they find enough evidence to bring drug charges, they find a gun, and she is not allowed to have one since she is a convicted felon. And they notice something that stops them in their tracks. They're looking at a wall full of inspirational sayings that she has posted, and they see, taped to a mirror, a copy of Eric's obituary. At this point, they really zeroed in on Corey as being, the prime suspect to Eric passing, and they need somebody to kind of connect those dots. Without Carmen, police really did not have much of a case. So can Carmen tell them if Corey had any connection to the fentanyl? She tells police that not only has Corey asked her to get fentanyl, but she did so on 2 separate occasions, and she even said things like, the first batch was not strong enough. Carmen explained she got 1 set of drugs sometime in February, and then was asked to get stronger stuff, and then got another dose of drugs a second time around. So Carmen is facing prosecution and years of prison time. Years to life for drug charges and gun charges. She is going to tell the cops whatever they want to hear, and they're making a plea deal. Carmen says her dealer was Robert Crozier. He is already in custody for other drug crimes, and he is also detoxing. He says that he and Carmen would meet at a gas station where he would sell her the drugs. Carmen says she would hide the drugs at one of the houses Corey was trying to flip. Crozier says it was not a regular thing. It is Not just the drug sales themselves, it is the timing. There were 30 text messages exchanged between Carmen and Corey on Valentine's Day 2022, the day of that infamous sandwich. And the other day is February 26th, which is right before Eric's death. Now law enforcement has the drug link through Carmen, and they have the financial information. Corey Richens was in massive
debt.
She was trying to funnel money back into her own real estate and house flipping business. You add this all up, and it is finally enough for police to make their move. A woman who wrote a children's book about grief after the death of her husband now faces charges for his murder. Corey Richens is charged with 1 count of aggravated murder and 3 counts of possession of narcotics with intention to distribute. I woke up in the morning to headlines of Utah mom and children grief book author arrested and charged with murder. It was shocking. It was unbelievable. I just could not fathom it. Like, not Corey. You know why?
Why?
Her? Like, it just became this huge story because she wrote that children's book. They're trying to ruin and convict an innocent mother. The simplest answer is often the correct one is most likely an accidental overdose.
I will take it too.
My grave that Corey did not do this. I too believe it is an accidental overdose. For Corey Richens, she is either victim or killer. There is nothing in between. Is she a widow who had lost her husband and the father of her children tragically? Or did she plan this all out to get from under some massive debt? In my experience, money and love are 2 of the most powerful motivators for a murder. Now, police know about the money, and there may be a romantic angle as
well.
If Corey was not with Eric on Valentine's Day, and she was not, who is she?
With
my kids, and I kind of wrote this book on the different emotions and grieving processes that we have experienced last year. And to make sense and process, I am sure. Right now, we have the arrest of a Utah mom who wrote a children's book about grief after her husband's death. She has now been charged with killing him. I am new to all of this as a widow, as a wife, but also, with my kids. I am thinking she is just powering through. She is trying her best. Maybe not to cry. Maybe not to get too emotional. Toxicology report found 5 times a lethal dosage of fentanyl in his system. This last page particularly poignant. I will forever love you, my sweet baby, until we see each other again. Yes, I am with you. Written as though it is in the father words for their boys. You are an amazing woman, and we thank you for being vulnerable and sharing this. And touching the lives of others. Thank you. I really appreciate being here. Thank you, Corey. Thank you. All right. Good Things Utah is back with more. State prosecutors say they do have enough evidence against Corey Richens to proceed with a trial. The imminent charge of murder, allegedly at this point. But still, naturally, you're thinking, can I believe what she said? On May 8th, 2023, Corey is arrested and charged with the aggravated murder of her husband, as well as several counts of possession of illicit drugs, with the intent to distribute. Finding that out was such a shock. I mean, talking about this now, it still blows my mind.
This could all very well be the perfect crime.
A storybook ending where she thought she could not get caught.
It
is a story that resonates because it is sort of this idea that she is two very different people, a Jekyll and Hyde situation. She was so empathetic at first glance, and then the story becomes much more sinister. In a June 2023 hearing where Corey is going to find out if she makes bail or not, she appears in street clothes, but she is in shackles. And she has this look of confidence on her face, almost as if she thinks this is still going to go her
way.
Prosecutors call 3 witnesses to testify as to why Corey Richins should not be released pending prosecution. The defendant came to the door and wrote a check from her business for $1,300 for the purchase of the fentanyl. The initial bail hearing had a forensic accountant going into her
files.
It went over the phone records and some of her searches on her phone. After her husband's death, during the bail hearing, the cell phone expert presented evidence that prosecutors said was a sign of consciousness of guilt. Consciousness of guilt can be virtually anything that a criminal defendant does that is consistent with them understanding that they are guilty. Some of the more interesting internet searches included luxury prisons for the rich in America. Can cops uncover deleted messages iPhone? If someone is poisoned, what does it go down on the death certificate as? And finally, what is a lethal dose of fentanyl? Those internet searches did not come until after Corey had been given a search warrant that was executed on her home. That search warrant laid out that they believed that Eric had died from a lethal dose of fentanyl, that she had murdered him with it. And so, to now say, well, she searched it, so it is a consciousness of guilt. I think it is human nature. Someone hands you something and says, hey, we think you poisoned them with fentanyl. And you are like, I do not even know what a lethal dose of fentanyl is. What do? We Google search. Prosecutors argue that the motivation behind Eric Richins' death is that Corey Richins was in massive debt. Being bad with money does not make you a murderer. The defense makes the argument that the prosecution has no case because they have no way of showing how the drugs ultimately got into Eric's
system.
They went through the home and they found absolutely no forensic evidence to substantiate their allegation that she must have given Eric fentanyl in this drink. But perhaps the most compelling argument was made by Eric's sister, Amy Richins, during her victim impact statement. Eric was a family man who always strove to be the absolute best father and husband. I go through the terrible sequence of events. I wonder when he realized he was in mortal danger. This last year has been a living hell for our family. We have watched as Corey has paraded around portraying herself as a grieving widow and victim while trying to profit from the death of my brother. The circumstances of this case weigh soundly against granting pretrial release of any kind.
Since Corey was
arrested, she has been held in the Summit County Jail. Corey not only has been separated from her children at this point, she lost custody of her children. The state of Utah takes her kids away, even though she is presumed innocent, because Utah has a law that allows the court to do that when one spouse is suspected of causing the death of the other spouse, and it is while she is in jail that authorities make what appears to be a stunning discovery. Deputies did what is called tossing her cell, where they go and they essentially perform a search. And they found a letter that the prosecution believed to be very, very significant in the case. Since her arrest, Corey Richens, the aspiring writer, is being held in Utah's Summit County Jail, and she is at it again. During a sweep of Corey's cell, an officer uncovers a 4-page letter. At the top of the first page, it says, "Walk the dog," with an exclamation point. And prosecutors argue that this letter is a message for Corey's mother to relay to her brother Ronnie what he needs to say to help get her off. It reads in part, "Here is what I am thinking, but you have to talk to Ronnie. He would probably have to testify to this." Eric told Ronnie he gets pain pills and fentanyl from Mexico from the workers at the ranch. Reward this, however, he needs to make the point with Mexico and drugs. Prosecutors say this is evidence of witness tampering, of influencing a person testimony that could potentially take the stand in her case, and providing a story that is alternative to how Eric had gone to Mexico and possibly obtained drugs while there. Of course, that is hugely significant from the perspective of detectives and the prosecution.
I mean, she just explained to
me that it was some fairy tale book that was loosely based on what is going on. But there is a whole bunch of stuff in there that makes it very obvious that it is not true. Corey has always maintained that the walk the dog letter was part of a greater manuscript. Not only was it attorney-client communication, it was also attorney work product. Is this damaging? Does she admit that she committed murder in it? Absolutely not. So the question becomes whether a jury will see this, as Corey insists, as a fictional manuscript or further evidence of her
guilt.
First with the death of her husband and this children book, Are You With Me? And now with this 4-page letter, you see Corey writing herself into the plot. It is Corey's own written word that prosecutors keep coming back to as evidence that she is in fact at the center of this. The Kalma's mom, accused of killing her husband and then writing a children's book about grief, is facing more criminal charges. So in March 2024, the prosecution amended their complaint to include an allegation of attempted murder. This is the attempted murder charge for the poisoned Valentine's Day sandwich that Eric ate just weeks before his death. Eric supposedly saying that he thinks his wife is trying to poison him. It is absolutely absurd. And the heat is about to be turned up even higher on Corey. With all the media coverage on her case, someone was watching. And that someone reached out to Eric Richens' family, wanting to clear a guilty conscience. That someone is 41-year-old Josh Grossman, who Corey had hired as a handyman at a home that she was renovating. Authorities learned that Grossman and Corey had been carrying on a years-long affair. According to investigators, the lovers texted almost daily. I want you today, every day, not just sexually, but physically, mentally, every day when I wake up, I do want a future together. So in addition to the financial motive here, we also have a totally separate motive, and that is she is having an affair where she is repeatedly communicating with this man, talking about how much she wants to be with him and how much she loves him. Among the frequent text exchanges in February of 2022, Corey wrote, "If he could just go away and you could just be here, life would be so perfect. I love you. You know, I will." Acknowledge the timing of the texts are not ideal. You know, is this evidence of murder?
No.
But is it one of those things that may weigh in the back of a juror mind when they are thinking about how to weigh all this other evidence?
I think
that absolutely becomes the case. We are following breaking news out of Summit
County for you.
The judge granted a request from the defense team to withdraw from her case. Suddenly, defense attorney Sky Lozaro withdraws from the case, citing a conflict of interest involving her law firm. And this preliminary hearing is a critical right that every single replacing Lozaro is public. Defender Kathy Nestor and co-counsel Wendy Lewis. Together, the defense attorneys have more than 30 years of experience. Whenever legal counsel changes in a case, this will heavily stall any sort of outcome, because now a new attorney has to come on, build a rapport with Corey, and learn the case inside
out.
In May 2024, just days after her new lawyers are appointed, Corey makes her first public statement in an audio recording released to ABC
News.
The world has yet to hear who I really am, what I have really done, or what I really did not do. What I have really done is protect Eric at all costs.
What
I really did not do is murder my husband. I could not and would not ever do that to Eric or anyone for that matter. I am asking the world to give me a chance. And Corey Richins will have that chance in court. While the narcotics charges were dropped, she has pleaded not guilty to the remaining charges, including 2 counts of insurance fraud. One of those charges alleges that Corey took out a life insurance policy on Eric without his knowledge. When you throw in a financial motive, that is big. That is huge. That she needed Eric Richins dead. That financial motive is massive. It is big. But then you throw in an affair. You throw in a love story. Now you are talking multiple motives. The state first has to prove that he was murdered. You know, that is step 1. And they have got to be able from the jury. I mean, I want to know how. You know, you cannot just
say he died.
She was there. It must have been her, you know, because she had an affair. They're going to have a hard time connecting those dots. All eyes on Utah this morning as the Corey Richins murder trial begins. The murder trial of Corey Richins is now underway. Nearly 3 years after her arrest, Corey Richins is in court right now for day 1 of that trial. We will be inside of that courtroom all week, bringing you the latest. I knew that this trial would be big. I do not know it was going to be this big. This story just in a quiet community that does not have things like this happening is obviously a pretty big deal. This is a small courthouse sort of off the beaten path in the beautiful mountains of Utah near Park City, Utah. Most people expect that there will be 12 people on a jury. But in this case, there were 8 jury members, 6 men, 2 women. My name is Laura, and I was the jury foreperson in the Corey Richins murder trial. Before being selected as a juror, I had heard or read just a couple of headlines, but I never really looked at stories. I really knew nothing about the case. Corey looks nervous. She is worried. She does not have that same confidence she did a few years ago. While the situation appears tough for Corey, she still has her supporters. I will be in the courtroom right there with her family, supporting her every second, every minute, every day, as long as it takes. She will beat this. Mark my words. All right, we will now proceed with opening statements. The prosecutor, Brad Blutworth, is very direct. He gets right to business. In opening statements, the prosecutor had a laundry list of motives as to why Corey would have killed her husband. The evidence will prove that on the day that Eric died, Corey Richins owed over $4.5 million to over 20 different lenders. That Corey Richins was chronically unhappy in her marriage. That Corey Richins murdered Eric for his money and to get a fresh start at life. On the defense side, they start with someone else's voice. Corey voice. The 911 call she made the night Eric died. Those were the sounds of a wife becoming a widow. The defense urged the jurors to focus on the 6 hours leading up to Eric's death and not the 6 years prior. So those 6 hours, somewhere in that time, Eric Richins died. Somewhere in that time, he ingested a fatal dose of fentanyl. What you are never going to hear is how that fentanyl got inside of him, because there is zero evidence of that. The witnesses that the state started with were powerful. Your Honor, the state calls Katie Richins Benson. They called Eric's sister, Katie, to the stand. You received a phone call about Eric. Yes, it was early in the morning. Who called you? My dad did. What did he say? It is not easy. He was screaming and crying. Eric is not breathing. Eric is not breathing. Sorry, guys. This was the worst day of my life. The state needs to convince the jury that Corey purchased that lethal dose of fentanyl with the intention to kill. When Carmen takes the stand, all eyes are on her. She makes or breaks this case for the state. Please proceed. Thank you, sir. Remember, Carmen Lauber was facing a lot of trouble with the law, but now she is testifying with immunity. She made a deal with prosecutors if she tells the truth about how Corey Richins purchased fentanyl from her. She is pretty much getting an out-of-jail-free pass for her testimony. She comes clean. The first part of her testimony is essentially Carmen Lauber laying out all of her sins for the entire world. Have you ever sold drugs? Yes. Do you have a criminal history involving drugs? Yes. Carmen became very emotional on the stand. And yes, she was given a deal for her testimony. But if you believe her, she insists that is not the only reason that she is doing this. She says she is trying to right a wrong for her role in all of this. Did you ask Corey Richins about Eric's death? Yes, I did. What did you ask? I said, please tell me these pills were not for him, when they had mentioned that it was from an overdose that hit hard, only for the fact that, if that is what happened, I needed to step up and take accountability of my part in this that happened.
And
what I was asked for. Defense attorneys like witnesses like Carmen, because she has a criminal record. They're going to go after her on her credibility, especially about the drug charges. And you lied about it? Yes. All right.
that
Is what addicts do when you are using. That is true. Addicts lie. All right. Active addicts. Next, the state calls the person they say put those drugs in. Carmen Hands. Robert Crozier. Remember, he is the one prosecutors say sold her the fentanyl that killed Eric. We sold pills in late 2021 and early 2022.
selling Rossi then, yes.
But on cross-examination, the defense points out that he had changed his story and is now saying those pills were not fentanyl when you initially agreed with detectives that you might have sold fentanyl. You were high, you were coming down, and you do not remember saying that specifically. That is correct. All this testimony was crucial for attempting to piece together the how. But what was really mind-blowing was the
why.
And that testimony came from Corey, longtime friends. Becky Lloyd is someone that was a friend of Corey and Eric, and someone that ended up working at C&E Masonry. Becky testifies that there was an evening in December during Christmas time that Corey and Becky started talking and having a bit of a heart-to-heart. She talked about how she was feeling trapped. She was feeling like there was not an easy way forward out of the marriage. And she said that in many ways it would be better if he were dead. Corey lawyers pounce, challenging Becky memory. A couple of weeks after Eric died, you gave an interview about this conversation you and Corey had. Yes. And is not it fair that in that first interview you never mentioned anything about saying it would be better off if Eric was dead?
Did you?
I do not recall. You do not recall? I do not recall. Okay. Your Honor. The state calls alley stakings. Alley staking is called to the stand. This is Corey's best friend, someone she has known since middle school. I have known I was going to take the stand for 4 years now, and it has been a nightmare. There was a lot of emotions in walking in the courtroom, and then seeing Corey. It felt like I was about to betray her going on the stand.
And I did not like that
feeling. Are you one of her best friends? Yes. Yeah, I was. Yeah. When I was asked on the stand if she was my best friend or not, like it is, I do not. No, because I am now learning a completely different side of this person that I knew and loved for the last 20 years. Allie should be a strong witness for the prosecution.
They want her to tell the jury about a
conversation she had with Eric about that infamous Valentine's Day sandwich.
But
it sort of backfires on them. He said that he thought that Corey had tried to poison him, but it was more of a funny story. It was like an allergic reaction, is what we had thought it was. We were all laughing, and that past laughter has now turned to loss. I wish I could say it was nice to see my friend, but I miss my friend. But that is, things are different now. having your best friend take the stand is one thing. Your Honor, the state calls Robert Josh Grossman.
But
when your ex-lover walks into the courtroom, well, that is just a whole other level. Mr. Grossman, do you need a minute or two? I do not know what I need. Please have a seat. Mr. Bloodworth, the state next witness, please. The most anticipated witness the state is about to call, it is a bombshell. Your Honor, the state calls Robert Josh Grossman. Josh Grossman is the man that Corey was having an affair with. She said she was in love with him, and he is the one who wrote those text messages to Corey. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give in the matter before the court to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, subject to the pains and penalties of perjury?
The
swearing in of a witness is usually a pretty routine thing in a courtroom.
But
not this one. While he is being sworn in, they are asking if he is going to be
honest.
He does not know how to answer it. Sir, have a seat for me if you do not
mind.
I have never seen this moment before, where the judge has to explain what he needs to do. Mr. Grossman, do you understand the difference between what is true and what is not true? I do. And then Josh says, okay, I understand. Yes, I am going to be honest in my answers. And right away, Josh has our attention. Sir, do you know Corey Richens? I do. And why did you move to Utah? To work with her, help her flip houses. Josh is quiet. He has this southern accent.
He is a
redhead like Eric. He served in the military, including combat in Iraq. Eric came from an affluent ranching family, and Josh was a man from South Carolina who was essentially couch surfing. She took care of me. You know, I lived for
free. She did.
She gave me money whenever I needed it. I just, I liked her. So I would work for free. His body is slouched. He fidgets. During that time that you were romantically involved with Miss Richens, did you love her?
Yes.
During that time, did you feel that she loved you? I think she did.
So,
this, of course, gives prosecutors more than just a financial incentive for Eric.
Death.
The prosecution introduced a series of text messages between Josh and
Corey.
They put them up on the screen for a painfully long period of quiet time, allowing everybody to read them. They were sad. They were very corny at times. He said, I tend to fall head over heels in love with someone.
Corey seemed a little less authentic.
Like she was kind of leading him on. I want to know everything about you. It is part of being in love. There is something specific you want to know. I will be up all night wondering, babe.
The text
ranged from poetic confessions of love, almost had like a middle school feeling about it. I love you. I love talking to you, being with you. I do not have that in my marriage, and I really enjoy my relationship and love for you. But you are
right.
We both know this love triangle cannot go on forever. He looks so uncomfortable as the world reads his private text messages. I love you. K. Kind.
O. Otoim.
You unique.
Romantic.
I. Inches away from signing her divorce papers and falling madly in love with her soulmate. Too late. I have already.
Fallen night.
There is this moment where he starts crying. I am watching this and wondering, what is the jury thinking right now?
We could not talk about it.
You could see in people's faces, in their eyes, like, oh, that was heartbreaking. Josh presented himself as very sincere and genuine, sad, broken-hearted. It was kind of devastating to watch him on the stand. The court, I think, was very patient with him. Do you need a minute or two? I do not know what I need.
Let us just start with that.
Why do we take a 5 pause for a moment? The text between Josh and Corey evolved.
Corey sort of suggesting to
Josh her dream life, which would be to live with him in the guest home of the Midway Mansion and run an event center together and raise children together.
I
have a crazy dream. I divorce and come up with millions and millions. We buy Midway and live in guest house and rent out the huge house as a big event center. $15,000 a day. Raise some kids, have a little farm.
Deal?
You see all of these exchanges and they contextualize what that relationship was. And then Corey sends her boyfriend a plea in the form of a text. And that is less than 48 hours before Eric is found dead.
She
texts roughly, hang in until Friday. Well, what was Friday? Friday was the day Eric Richens died. Life is going to be different. I promise. Can I try Friday? Give me a few days. Hang in there until then, please. The relationship between Josh and Corey just fizzled out. It was in the weeks after Eric passed away.
He
testifies that he and Corey take a drive. They stop and they sit in her car and
talk.
Josh testified that Corey asked him a very important question, perhaps a very revealing question. What, sir, did she ask? She asked if I had ever killed anybody. And was that specific to killed anybody while serving in Iraq?
Right.
Did you respond? I did. Did she ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
Sir, what was that follow-up question? She asked me how it made me feel, or something along those lines. Grossman dramatic and emotional testimony comes to a close.
And
then something utterly mind-blowing unfolds in the courtroom with the defense team as they are about to present their case. Miss Lewis, Miss Nestor, what is the plan? Ready to go. Who is defense counsel first witness?
Could I have just a
minute?
Yeah.
We have a couple of options. Understood. The prosecution case took 13 days and the defense case was expected to go 7 to 10 days.
Corey.
Defense attorneys are whispering to each other back and forth, and it seems like they're trying to decide who to call first. But that is not what we got. Your Honor, actually at this time the defense intends to rest. They said they were calling no one and also rested. It was an absolute shock. I was very surprised that there was no defense. So, when the defense rested without presenting any witnesses, my mouth, I think, dropped open. There has to be another side of this story, and we can fill in the little holes. And then when they did not call anyone, I was shocked. Why would Corey Richens' defense rest without calling anyone? They may believe the prosecution did not make out their case.
That
Having any witness on the stand would not make sense because they have already won their case. Do you understand that you have the right to testify at trial? Yes, I do. Are you following your attorney advice and waiving your right to testify at trial? Yes, I am. Prosecution and the defense have presented their closing arguments. Judge Mrazek instructs the jury and courts dismiss. Then on the same day that the trial ends, and just within a few hours, there is word from the court. Okay, I just received some news that a verdict is in. No way. If you feel overcome with emotion, just look down. We cannot have any outward reaction. I told my kids early on that Eric had died, and my kids were devastated. I said along the way, sometimes it looks like Corey might have done it. But, and then my kids would say, well, did she? And I would say, I do not think so. But it sometimes looks like it. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that Corey is innocent. I know my little sister, she loves her. Her boys weigh too much to take their father away from them. State of Utah versus Corey Richens. Miss Richens is present.